Hey everybody, I hope y'all are having a fantastic week. As we come to this week, we're taking a pause. This is the first lesson that we're going to look at. Our plan is for on either the first or the second Wednesday of every month that we're going to take a pause from our lesson about looking at the thread of the gospel throughout the whole entire Bible. And what we're going to do is we're going to start discussing some tough issues. We're going to talk about issues that are facing you, that are facing the world today, and how that we can deal with these issues biblically, right? How we can deal with these issues, because the Bible has a lot to say about what's going on in the world right now. And we're going to look at that today. And so for our first one, some of these may be heavy. Some of them may be able to be a little more lighthearted. But, this first one, it's kind of really a heavy kind of topic. Because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about depression today. And, depression is something that I think that we've kind of not really talked about in the church a lot. And a lot of these issues that we're going to look at and these tough issues are things that we don't talk about in the church. Because people aren't prepared, people may not understand, or it's a taboo kind of topic. But in the world we live in, we need to have a biblical perspective about these things. Because what you're hearing so much is that you're hearing so much, not just about depression, but for all these topics probably that we're going to talk about, is you're hearing so much about them from the world, social media, the news, TV, all these things, and we're not hearing this biblical perspective about these things. So we're going to kind of, raise the curtain on these tough issues, and we're going to look at these. So we're going to talk about depression. So whenever we talk about depression, I think that's something that we've heard a lot, especially over the past 2 years. When going through the pandemic and dealing with that, we've seen a lot more of depression and anxiety, which is another topic that we'll talk about at a different time. But we've seen depression, and it is just on the rise over the past few years. There's a big medical research company called the Mayo Clinic. Don't quote me on this, but I think it's named after mayonnaise. And so what we'll say is they call it. Here's what they say about depression, and I'm going to read this as a quote. So, depression is a mood disorder that's caused by persistent feelings of sadness and loss of interest. Also called major depression, major depressive disorder, or clinical depression, it affects how you feel, think, and behave, and can lead to a variety of emotional and physical problems. You may have trouble doing normal day-to-day activities, and depression may make you feel as if life isn't worth living. More than just a bout of the blues, depression isn't a weakness, nor is it something that you can simply snap out of. Depression may require long-term treatment, but don't get discouraged. Many people with depression feel better with medication, psychological counseling, or both. Other treatments also may help with depression as well. Depression isn't just being sad. I think that, we have to kind of separate those two, and we have to understand that. Because just because you feel sad about a situation doesn't mean you're depressed, right? Because there's a difference of it. Depression is a severe form of sadness. It's persistent, and it affects the way that you live, the things you do, and it just makes everything seem worthless. The next time you watch a sad movie or get a bad grade and you feel sad and disappointed, no, it's probably not depression. It could be, but it's more than likely it's not. I think depression is one of those things that we sometimes, just because we feel sad about something and we feel really sad, we get diagnosed with depression. But whenever it starts to affect things and it's persistent and it lasts for a long time and you can't get over certain things, that's whenever you start to have issues and problems with that. It can be caused by many things. It can be caused by a tragedy that you're going through. It can come as a result of bullying, something that's going on in your life, something that's happening to you and the world around you. Or it could be just a chemical imbalance in your brain that's been passed on from generation to generation through your family. So depression can be caused by many different things, and it can also be cured and helped in many ways. So before we kind of get into depression, what I want to do is I just want to take a second to talk about some of the ways that we have responded to depression that is incorrect, that is incorrect and wrong way to look at this. There are many Christians in our society today who view depression as, and say that because you're a Christian, because you profess that you're a Christian, you have Christ in your heart, you can't be depressed. You cannot be depressed. That could be completely, that is the furthest thing from the truth right there. Right? That is the furthest thing from the truth whenever we think about it. Because guess what? Depression is real. Depression is that way. And unfortunately, depression is a part of our fallen world. And because of our sinful fallen world we live in, we have depression. If Adam and Eve wouldn't have sinned, we wouldn't have depression. We wouldn't have these struggles that we have. But yet, because of the fall, and we live in a fallen world, yes, we have these things. We have sometimes these chemical imbalances in our brains that cause us to react differently to certain things and to do things like this. For example, I know someone who was dealing with depression. One of the biggest depressions and probably one of the most common depressions out there, it's postpartum depression, right? What happens after a woman gives birth to a child. And then she deals with this sense of depression, this sense of loneliness. And that happens, and it's common, right? It's common because, you've been dealing with this human inside of you growing and nurturing for 9 months, and now they're out of it, and they're starting to grow and do things by themselves. And I'm going to throw some examples out. Holly, my wife, she's dealt with depression, postpartum depression. She dealt with it with both of them. She dealt with it with my daughter more severely because I think with the situation surrounding the pregnancy and all that, she dealt with that. And she went out and got help. She's a Christian, but yet she had to go get help. All she needed was just something to help her snap out of it, right? It's not just something you can just will to snap out of sometimes. And it wasn't that way with Holly. Holly just couldn't snap herself out of it. She just needed like a kickstart. So she went to the doctor. We talked to the doctor. Doctor gave her some medicine. She took the medicine for a month and was back to normal. That happens. Sometimes it happens fast. Sometimes it's a slower process for that. And so, and then we talk about this person that Christians can't be depressed. We talked about that, right? Well, I know someone who, I grew up with someone who went to their parents after they had postpartum depression. And they had it severely. And they're still dealing with it today because of this. And, I try to help them as much as I can, but sometimes it's like they need that help from their parents. So they went to their parents and they said, and their parents said, "Oh, you can't be depressed. You're a Christian." And so she left, but that made her feel even worse. And so it's just we have this misconception in Christianity, and then that's what I'm saying. We have this misconception sometimes about mental health, and we are in the process now of where I think more and more Christians are accepting of mental health issues. We don't just say you just automatically healed from it because you're a Christian, or you're immune from this because you're a Christian anymore. We've gotten better at identifying those things, and we've gotten better at addressing them in the proper way to actually help people and not hurt people. And so, what are some ways that we look that people show that they're depressed? You look at things like, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Hoarders, right? There's just so much stuff that they have, but there's always a trigger that does it, that causes them to be depressed. Maybe it was, they were abused as a child, or it was the loss of a child, or the loss of a close loved one, the loss of a husband or wife. All these things triggered it, started it. And that's the same thing that happens with depression, right? Some people just don't care. They sit back, they don't care. They don't care, or they just let their house just fall into disarray. Their house is a mess. They do things that they wouldn't normally do because they're not in the right state of mind, right? They're not in the right state of mind. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk to start off with in our first section. We try to cure our things through many different ways. We try to cure depression through many different ways. And with things that a lot of times end up causing more harm than good. Some people bottle up their feelings, just hold it in. And that's not good. That's never good to do. Trust me, I've done that so many times in my life where I've just bottled up my feelings inside of me. And then what happens is it hurts you because you're holding stuff in. It affects your stress level because you're holding stuff in. It can cause high blood pressure, other health issues as well. So you just hold stuff in and don't talk to somebody. about that. Some people do that. That's dangerous. Some people cut themselves, right? I'm sure, maybe people who do that, who they take a knife and they physically harm themselves whenever they're not feeling good. Some people turn to, casual sex, alcohol, drugs, all these other things. Today we're going to talk about a few healthy ways that we can deal with depression. And then we'll look at how we can help those that are dealing with depression, because maybe you're not going through depression, but maybe you know someone who is, or you see the warning signs in somebody, and just ways that you can come alongside and help those people who are dealing with depression. Because I almost guarantee you that you know someone who's dealing with depression, because while we may think of depression as an adult thing, but because of the pandemic, because of everything that's going on, you think about it, people are depressed. People have lost so much. People, have been just trained so much to do crazy things, and we live in a world where depression is normal. It seems like it's becoming rampant. And so here's some of the things that we can look at. We'll look at this. So the first thing that we see is that we do whenever you're hurting. If you are hurting, talk about your hurts. I know this is a hard thing to do, but talk about your hurts. What we're going to do is we're going to look today, and we're going to look in the Bible, and we're going to see some things and some of the writers of the Bible and some of the writers who are dealing with some things in their life. We're going to look at some things in Psalms and Lamentations and some other passages as well, where people were bearing their hearts. We got to remember, Psalms are poetry, and a lot of times people, even today, express what's going on in their lives through poetry, through art, through these other aspects as well. And so that's what we're going to see today. So I'm going to read Psalm 42 verses 1 to 8. As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God? My tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all day long, where is your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in the procession to the house of God, with glad shouts and public praise, a multitude keeping festival. Why are you cast down, O my soul, and why are you in turmoil in me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation. And my God, my soul is cast down within me. Therefore I remember you from the land of Jordan, and of Hermon from the Mount Mitzar. Deep calls to deep, and the roar of your waterfalls. All of your breakers and your waves have gone over me. By day the Lord commands his steadfast love, and at night his song is with me, a prayer to the God of my light. So here, David is in here, he's speaking, he's talking here. And as we read and as we dig in, we start to see some things that, David, who is a man after God's own heart, a man who followed God, a man who was the king of Israel, who was leading the nation, was dealing with these struggles about his soul. He says in here that his heart is breaking. That's more than just a normal sadness. That's an intense sadness right there. It's a deep sense of sadness and worry. And as you read this passage, you can see that. We see this. David is scared and afraid because guess what? His enemies are surrounding him. Not only that, they're also taunting him. They're mocking him. They're trying to turn him away from his God. They're bullying him and not allowing him to live the life the way that God wants him to. And so we see this, and we see that David is going through some things right now. You look through the Psalms, and you see this over and over and over again. You see this theme of, yes, some of the Psalms are Psalms of praise, but some of the Psalms are Psalms of crying out to God as your last hope, crying out to God because you've lost everything. You just look at that, and later on we'll look at an example in the Bible of someone in the Bible who I believe had depression, was going through depression, was dealing with depression in his own way. And so we're going to look at that, and we're going to see that as well later on. So despite his feelings, David has done two things in this passage that are really important. Number one, he talked to God about his hurts. He talked to God about his hurts. And that's what we should do as Christians. The first thing we should do, no matter, and whenever things are good, whenever we're feeling great, or whenever we're struggling with issues, the first thing we should do is go and talk to God about it. Go and talk to God, pray to God, ask for Him to help us get over it. Right? And then He wrote His feelings down for others to see. Journaling and other things like that can be very therapeutic, can be very much help people get over and get through issues that you're dealing with in your life. It really, truly can help because you're putting your ideas down on paper. You're doing that. And so that really, I think, helps people. David turned to God first. David turned to God first. And as Christians, that should be our first response, is to turn to God for help. Right? To turn for God for help. He said, God, my heart is breaking. I am deeply discouraged. I think sometimes we get this idea in prayer that our prayers are, just like, Dear Heavenly Father, bless our food. Or Dear Heavenly Father, please pray for this person and this person, this person, this person. We don't pray for ourselves. We don't bring our feelings to God. We don't tell God how we feel about the situations we're going through. You know what? He knows about the situations we're going through. He knows how we're feeling about it. But yet, whenever we do that, it frees us up. And it's whenever we tell God how we're feeling. David wrote down his feelings and his thoughts, and he shared them with others. So he may have sent this letter to some of his friends, or he may have sent this psalm to some of his friends. And they helped him along the way. Right? So though his words are recorded in the Bible, he's sharing them with us now. He may have never intended for us to see this. He may have never intended for this to be in the Bible, but it is. It is. So it's part of the inspired Word of God. And, I think that we have to realize that, right? But when's the last time you shared with someone how you were feeling? How you truly and deeply felt? I encourage you first to talk to your parents first. And then, a trusted friend or an adult. Right? You got to be careful who you're talking to. Because you want to make sure that this person is going to give you a godly answer. A godly answer. So that you know the right thing. Because you know what? You don't want to just go to someone who's going to go like, oh, this person's having these thoughts. Oh, this person's dealing with this. This person's having problems. You don't want to deal with someone. You have to be someone trusted who's going to keep that secret. Who's not going to tell anybody. Right? So if you're depressed or hurting, talk about your hurt. Verbalize it. Write it down. Share it with God and with others. Because guess what? That's what you got to do. That's what you need to do. And that leads into our next thing, is that whenever you're dealing with depression, realize that you are not alone. You're not alone in dealing with depression, because there are many people who have dealt with depression throughout history, throughout the Bible. Like I said, we're going to look at what I believe is one prominent example of someone who was struggling with this. Someone was so much to the point that they were struggling with depression that they were asking God to take their life away. And we'll look at that here in a second. But we're going to read now Philippians 1, verse 7 to 8, because guess what? You are not alone. You are not alone. It is right for me to feel this way about you, because I hold you in my heart, for you are all partakers with me of grace, both in my imprisonment and in the defense and confirmation of the gospel. For God is my witness, how I yearn for you all with the affection of Christ. These verses are great and awesome, and I love these verses because this is how it really teaches us as Christians that we're supposed to be like family. We're supposed to be like family. Whenever you think about that, is that if we're like family, we trust each other, we love each other unconditionally. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you're dealing with, we love you. Right? We love you. Paul's writing this to these Christians. He says, you have a special place in my heart. I love you, and I long for your compassion. Love your compassion that you give me, you show me along the way. He sees fellow believers as family and friends, people he cares about, who cares about him. Right? And often that's where we get, I think, messed up in the church, is that we don't view things that way. We don't view life that way. We don't view each other that way. We're too afraid of being ourselves in charge of letting through and showing someone our true selves, because we struggle with that, because we're afraid of what they're going to think about us. We're afraid they're going to think we're a bad Christian. We're afraid they're going to make fun of us, that they're not going to come alongside and encourage us, which is what we're supposed to do, which is what Paul was longing for. And Paul was saying here is that's what they're doing, is they make that way. They made it that way where family and friends, they came alongside and encouraged him. We often look at each other and think, do I like them? Do I have a good personality? Do they annoy me? Could I hang out with them? The problem is that we make the relationships about us, right? The relationships become about us. We want to know if they will benefit us. Paul is writing to people with different personalities, and he tells them that he loves them. He sees what's most important. He sees that we're all family of God. We're all Christians. And that's what really matters. It doesn't matter how it's going to benefit me. It matters that we're family, that we're there alongside to lift each other up. I remember a few years ago, there was a story that came on about something that was unfathomable in the world of sports. There's a softball team they were playing. And so This girl got up who had never hit a home run before. There were two players on base, or one or two players on base. And she went and she hit a home run. And as she was rounding first base, something happened, and she ended up tearing her ACL in her leg. And she could not run. She could not walk. I know how that feels. That is so much pain and so much agony that she would have been in, because I tore my ACL as well, playing sports. And the problem is, during a game in baseball, she was the batting team. No one on her team could come and pick her up. If they subbed someone in for her, it wouldn't count as a home run. Right? They still got the runs, but it would have counted as a single, because they would have put her on first base, because it was as far as she made it. But what happened was, and the unfathomable thing, is that the opposing team came and asked the referee if it was okay because they were on the field, if they carried her to touch each base and carried her home. And two girls came alongside of that person and carried them. They came and touched each base, touching home, so that she got a home run. The girls who carried that softball, they were on the opposite team, yet they still cared for her. They still cared that she got this home run, which was her first ever home run and her only home run that she ever would have gotten in her career, because her softball career was done after this injury. So when you're depressed or feeling sad or hurt, you have people around you who will be there with you. They shouldn't judge you. They shouldn't look down on you. They should love you. And hopefully we could create that environment here in church, to where if you're dealing with these things, you feel comfortable to come to people to say, you know what? I'm dealing with this. This is what I'm going through, because that is so important. People around you need to get people around you who will pray for you, hug you, buy you cupcakes, text you, all of that, check in on you, make sure you're okay. That's what's great about the body of Christ. But there are also people around you who have been hurt or depressed before. So when you feel depressed, don't think that it's weird or that you're alone, because guess what? There are people in this room right now who have been depressed, who are depressed. You're not alone. And I'm just going to say this right now. I think, and I was dealing with depression 2 years ago. Just with everything going on, it was a whirlwind. And I'm not trying to make this about me, but I'm just wanting to let you know that it's okay to be depressed. You can be depressed. You're not alone, because I've dealt with it. We're dealing with COVID, and then I lost my job, not because of COVID, but because of some other things that happened right before COVID. I was losing my full-time job. I was losing a $50,000 source of income for my family. I was losing health insurance for my family. I was losing all this other stuff. And that was fine, because they gave me like a 60-day notice. But after it was time to leave. It was hard. I would sit around, and Holly and my wife will tell you, I sat around not wanting to do anything. I just wanted to do nothing but be on my phone, and that led me even into further depression, looking at social media and being on social media and all that stuff, because that can be harmful as well. So it's important that you press, but this next thing is important as well that we do, and it's you have to ask for help. Ask for help. So we're going to read Psalm 121 verses 1 to 8 for this. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you all from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep you going and you're coming in from this time forth and forevermore. This is an entire chapter from the Bible, and the author is hurting and is in need. He's calling out, just ask, where does his help come from? Who's going to help me? And then he says, the Lord, the one who made heaven and earth. He goes on to describe God and just describe God's greatness and his vastness and his awesomeness. He hears one that he's the one we turn to for help. Because guess what? He created everything. He's watching over us. He protects you like a shield. Right? He protects you like a shield. So this man in a time of depression, he turns to God. He turns to God for help. Have you asked God for help when you're hurting? I think what happens so many times in our Christian life is we turn to God last when we're going through struggles, when we're dealing with issues, when we're dealing with problems. We turn to God as the last-ditch effort instead of first. And if we were to turn to God first, it may not get as severe. We try to fill our lives with these other things that we talked about, like we talked about earlier with buying things or casual sex, drugs, alcohol, social media, other worldly sources, instead of turning to God as Christians. And yes, there's still times whenever you need help, but guess what? If you ask for help, God's going to help you. God may provide someone for you to help. God may direct you to where he needs to do. So this man, he turns to God for help. Have you asked God for help when you're hurting or confused or depressed or disappointed? Turn to him and just say, God, help me. If you don't know what else to say, just say, God, help me. You don't have to say an elaborate prayer with magical words in it. And I think that's where we get off sometimes too in prayer, is that we have to have these magical words that we have to say. But the truth is we don't. We don't. We can just literally say, God, help me. God, help me. That's all we have to say. And yes, as you grow in your walk and as you grow in this and as you get out of this, sometimes you'll be able to verbalize more what's going on. You'll be able to verbalize what's happening, what you need. But if you don't know what to pray for, just say, God, help me. That's simple. That's all you have to remember. But it's also important to ask for help from others. To ask help from others. Just like we've been saying over and over again, go to your parents. Go to a leader, go to a trusted leader, go to a trusted friend, a teacher, a guidance counselor, somebody. We are not created to live alone, but in life together. And look, I'm just going to say this. I love technology. You all know this. I'm sitting here reading my notes off of a tablet. I have a computer. I have phone. We're all this, but all these things have hurt our personal relationships with each other. Yes, you can grow meaningful relationships through texting, but you got to learn as well to build relationships through talking through verbalizing things. Because guess what? That is important as well. Because you're not going to be able to all the time do these things. You have to be able to sometimes talk to people. You can't just text a counselor. You have to be able to talk. And so to be able to do that really helps. Find someone that you can talk to. Because guess what? We're not meant to be alone. We're not meant to be on our smartphones texting each other 24/7. We're built for community. We're built to have companionship. You know, we see this over and over and over again in the Bible. You know, we have to have a life together. You know, and unfortunately, many times we still consider asking for help as a sign of weakness. And we have to put that misconception out of our minds. Asking for help is by no means a sense of weakness. You know what it actually is? It's a sign of strength. It's a sign that you're willing to admit that you need help. It's a sign of strength to ask for help. It shows you actually want help, you desire help. And so that's why we need to ask for help from God and ask for help from someone else who's trusted. And preferably that would be someone who is a Christian, someone who you know you can trust. But yet, you know, if you can't find somebody that you trust that can point you in the right direction to help you get over these feelings, that you do this. And the last thing about this section is we're going to talk about that daylight is coming. Daylight is coming. There's hope on the horizon. Not all hope is lost, but there's great hope that you can have. We're going to read Lamentations 3:21-23. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Depression can be dark and hopeless. Trust me, that's how I felt whenever I was going through it. That's how my wife felt when she was dealing with postpartum depression. That's how many people feel when they go through depression. But if you truly know God, then you know that every day He gives you strength and new miracles. He is showing you compassion and love. This passage says their mercies are new every morning. Daylight is coming. God is restoring and healing you. And He'll use that. And sometimes He'll use other people to do that. Sometimes He'll use medicine to do that. Sometimes He'll use these other things to help you through. Because guess what? There's daylight's coming. But you just have to ask for help. You have to go to people. You have to find people, right? You have to ask for help. You have to realize you're not alone. And you got to realize that to talk about it. And whenever you do, daylight is coming. There is hope on the other side. There's hope on the horizon that we can see. There's a moment in The Dark Knight where Harvey Dent says something similar. He says, "The night is darkest just before the dawn, but the dawn is coming." It always seems that whenever we're going through depression, whenever we get to our darkest point, our lowest point, there's always hope. Because it's always darkest. The night's always darkest before the dawn, but dawn is coming. There's hope coming. You just have to look forward. Look forward to that. Find that and push through by doing those things. So really quickly, what we're going to do is we're going to look at an example of someone in the Bible who I feel was dealing with depression. We're going to talk about Elijah. Now, Elijah was one of the prophets, the nation of Israel. We're going to find his story in 1 Kings chapter 18-19, and some chapters before and some chapters after that, but specifically what we're looking at today. I'm going to recap chapter 18 because, you know, I could literally probably sit here and I actually have preached before on this 18 and 19, 2 or 3 different sermons that deal with this. So Elijah was a prophet. He challenged the prophets of Baal to a contest on the top of Mount Carmel. And it was whoever who got this. So he was sitting there and he had the prophets of Baal go first. They did all these things and nothing would happen. The fire didn't combust on this. And so Elijah comes up and he brings all the nation of Israel before him to do this, to show that God is truly God and that they don't need to worship Baal anymore. And so that's the whole purpose behind this. And so we see this in First Kings chapter 18. And then so, Elijah does these things. He sacrifices. It comes his time. He comes down. He builds a trough. He puts a trough around there, around the altar, cuts the meat up, and then they pour 12 barrels of water on there. They pour a bunch of water on it. He prays a very simple prayer, and then everything's engulfed in flames, and then all the prophets of Baal are slaughtered right then and there. So Elijah's on this high at this point. And Ahab the king at that time goes back and tells his wife Jezebel what has happened. Jezebel is a foreigner, which is a whole other issue that we've looked at and dealt with before. But we see here is that Jezebel is threatens Elijah because she killed all the prophets of Baal. So I'm going to read chapter 19, verses 1 to 10. That's going to be all we're going to read, because otherwise we'll be here for another 2 hours. So Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. And then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, "So may the gods do to you and more if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat under a broom tree. And he asked that he might die, saying, It is enough now, O Lord, take my life away from me, for I am no better than my fathers. And he lay down, slept under a broom tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, Rise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head, a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down. And the angel came to him again a second time and touched him and said, Arise and eat, for the journey is too great for you. And he rose and ate and drank and went in with the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, to the Mount of God. Then he came to the cave and lodged in it. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he said, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the people of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with a sword. And I, even I only am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So I really see here some issues with depression here, right? Elijah's to the point where he wants to die. He's ready to die. He doesn't want to live anymore because it's after. But here's the thing, and I think what my point with this is that you don't have to be. You can be going on a high, everything be going right, and then you just fall into depression. That can happen in our lives. That happens here. You remember Elijah's on this huge high. He just defeated the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel. All the prophets of Baal are gone. Israel's ready to turn back to God because they've seen that God was a true God. But yet he sits back and says, I am left, and there's no one else beside me. He goes here, he's ready to die, and then God sends an angel. God sends someone to help him. So we have to be willing to ask for help, but also be willing that if someone comes alongside and wants to help us and sees we're going through depression, to help. And that's what we're going to look at next. Is we're going to look at how do we help someone. Maybe you're not dealing with depression yourself, but how do you help someone to hurt it? And this doesn't mean that you're off the hook, that you're never going to suffer from depression, but you can have the privilege of helping those who are depressed and hurting by coming alongside of them. So I'm going to give you four things you can do to help those who are hurting or depressed. The first thing is actively listen. Listen to your friends. Don't just try to fix them. I think our human nature is for us to try to fix things. We hear something's wrong, we want to fix it. We want to realize what's wrong. We want to make it right? That's what we want to do. And we just need to sometimes listen. I'm going to tell you something that someone told me one time. He said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we speak. But the reality is a lot of times we speak twice as much. Actively listening involves us taking a step back, letting them, sometimes people just want to vent. Sometimes people just want to talk. And that helps them. They don't want anything to be fixed. They just want someone to listen. And so actively listening, don't just try to fix them. Try to get where they're going through. Let them talk about what they're going through. Then ask questions. And then listen again. Encourage your friend or loved one you're talking to that their sadness isn't going to last forever. Right? Encourage your friend or loved one to talk about his or her sadness, to help you understand. And that may even help them understand more, which can help the person have that sense of control over their emotions instead of their feeling their emotions are controlling them. This may require you to put down your phone, your game controller, and listen. Listen. Holly gets on to me all the time about this. Right? I got to do a better job of this myself sometimes, is not being distracted while I'm listening so I can make sure I fully understand what's going on. Second thing, number 2, most important thing, and probably one of the more important things in this, don't be judgmental. People who are struggling with depression judge themselves every day. That's what I did whenever I was dealing with it in the past. I was judging myself every day. I was like, what did I do? How bad am I a person that they let me go? What's going on? Why did this happen? So the last thing they need is for you to judge them. Be patient. Communicate patience with them and grace. By doing this, you help them to become more patient and gracious towards themselves. You help to shape their attitude so that they don't judge themselves as much. People always tend to keep their depression a secret. Right? Imagine, because they're afraid of being judged, and imagine telling a deep secret or struggle to someone else. How would you want them to react? How would you want them to react? Probably not in a judgmental way. Probably not in a way that is upset, but to with grace and understanding, and that if it was something that they've done where it is a sin, that God can forgive them of that. All right. Number 3, be consistent. Be consistent. Few things are harmful as those who are depressed as people who are inconsistent in their lives, as inconsistent friends. Depression often involves low self-esteem, lack of confidence, negative thinking, all of which are confirmed when people they thought or hoped that they could count on didn't come through. Someone comes to you and they're going through something, hang out with them like normal. Have lunch together. Call them. Text them. Consistency is key to helping that person overcome this and to come alongside. And these are all good points for us in our Christian walk, even if we're not dealing with depression. Consistency is key. And then the third thing is no outsiders. And what I mean by this is, if you're out with a group of friends in public, make sure that if this friend is dealing with something, that they're not stuck at the end. That they're in the middle. Because what happens is a lot of times whenever you're stuck on the end, you feel like you're missing out on conversations. This may sound silly and this may sound goofy, but it makes sense. Make sure that they have someone on each side, because that gives, once again, at least in their minds, the idea that they're being supported by people. They have people around them to encourage them. The person in the role has trouble hearing conversations, and they may think that can even help them even worse. If someone's dealing with depression, that can make their loneliness even more intense because they don't feel like they're a part of everything. Generating feelings of insecurity or worry that he or she isn't connecting with others is a part of that. So as a group, they don't have to know what's going on, but just make sure that they're not at the end, right? So make sure every effort to make sure your friend is the center of the action, is a part of what's going on. Just don't be too obvious about it. Right? Maybe what you need to do is if your friend's at the end and they're going through this, just switch places and have yourself on the end so that they have other people around them. Right? That's something that you can do. Don't treat them like they're needy or different, because guess what? They're not, but just be aware. I want to guarantee that this is a place here where everyone belongs. Everyone belongs here. There's no outsiders here. Remember this, life hurts, but God heals. Life will hurt, but God will heal us through His power and through other people that we have in our lives. Thank you so much for watching. I know this is a tough topic for us to deal with, and it's something that's hard, but yet it's something that's very necessary, I feel, for us to deal with in our society today. So just remember these things as we go out. If you have any questions, let me know. If you're dealing with depression, you're dealing with these thoughts, you're dealing with these struggles, reach out to somebody, whether it's me, whether it's a professional, whether it's someone at your school, a trusted friend, whoever it is. Reach out to somebody, because it is very important, because mental health is something that is one of the biggest struggles we have in our society today. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know if you have anything. And as always, thank you so much, and hope you have a fantastic week.